For more than 20 years, she lived in silence, carrying memories that weighed heavier with each passing season, memories she swore she would never allow to surface again. People on the outside saw a clean break, a simple separation, a story that had been buried under time and distance. But the truth was far more complicated, far more emotional, and far more haunting than anyone ever imagined. She did not stay silent because she had nothing to say. She stayed silent because the truth was too painful, too explosive, too tied to moments that shaped her life in ways no one knew. Over the years, she watched as rumors twisted her choices, as strangers painted her as cold, bitter, or unwilling to fight for her marriage, and she carried that judgment quietly, believing that protecting his image was somehow more important than defending her own heart. But silence is heavy, and secrets are not weightless. They press against the soul, tightening slowly until breathing becomes difficult. She tried to move on, tried to rebuild, tried to convince herself that the past no longer mattered. But memories have their own voice, and they return exactly when we think we've outrun them. Then came the moment. A small trigger, a simple conversation, a forgotten item found in an old box that reopened everything she had worked so hard to bury. She realized that the truth she had kept locked away wasn't just hurting her, it was shaping her, limiting her, dimming parts of her life she wanted to reclaim. And after decades of protecting someone who never protected her in return, she finally reached the place where silence no longer felt like peace. Speaking wasn't revenge, it wasn't anger, it wasn't an attempt to stir old wounds. Speaking was survival, a release she needed to breathe again. When she finally opened her heart and shared her story, the world didn't hear the voice of a bitter ex-wife. They heard the voice of a woman who had spent half her life carrying the weight of emotional scars no one saw. A woman who stayed silent not because she was weak, but because she believed that honesty would cause more destruction than healing. And now, as she confirms what she endured, her voice trembles with a mixture of pain, relief, and long-awaited truth. This confession isn't meant to expose him, it's meant to free her, and for the first time, she stands in the light without fear, without secrets, and without the burden of protecting a story that was never hers alone to carry. It was an ordinary afternoon when she opened the dusty storage box, expecting nothing more than old photographs and forgotten souvenirs from a life she no longer lived. But sitting at the bottom, beneath years of untouched memories, was a folded envelope sealed with the kind of care a person uses when they hope something will never be opened again. She froze the moment she saw it. The handwriting was unmistakable, familiar, sharp, filled with emotions she once believed were love, but later learned were layered with something much more complicated. Her hands trembled as she held it, not because she feared what it contained, but because she instantly remembered the day she found it the first time, hidden in a place it never should have been. Back then, she had read the first few lines and felt her entire world tilt. The words were not innocent. They weren't friendly. They weren't pastoral or spiritual. They were deeply personal, and they didn't belong to her. That letter revealed a truth she had tried to ignore, a truth that explained the sudden changes in their home. The late-night calls, the distant stares, the unexplained tensions, the silence that grew between them like a growing shadow. It wasn't the existence of the letter that broke her, it was the realization that the emotional divide she felt wasn't imagined. It was real. It had a name. It had a tone. It had someone else's handwriting all over it. She had tucked it away back then, convincing herself that confronting it would only make things worse. She wanted to believe things would return to normal, that love would somehow erase the ache in her chest. But finding it again, decades later, brought back every detail with a force she wasn't prepared for. The creases on the paper, the faint scent of old perfume, the unmistakable, emotional intimacy between the lines, it all brought her back to the exact moment she realized her marriage had crossed the point of no return. She sat on the floor, staring at the letter, her heart pounding with memories she had spent years trying to forget. This wasn't just evidence of betrayal, it was the moment she understood why her life had fractured the way it did, why she walked away, why she stayed silent, why she never looked back. And now, as she finally speaks openly, she confirms what that letter revealed long ago, not out of bitterness but out of a need to reclaim the story that once shattered her. Because the truth inside that envelope didn't simply end a marriage, it forever changed the woman she became. It was the moment she never wanted to remember. The moment that marked the beginning of the end, the moment that still wakes her in the middle of the night with a tightness in her chest. It happened behind closed doors, away from the church, away from the cameras, away from the people who believed their marriage was built on faith and unity. Only one trusted friend was present. Someone who had been called to the house because the tension between them had reached a level neither of them knew how to control anymore. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken words and emotions that had been building for months. She stood in the doorway, her hands shaking as she tried to stay calm, trying to hold on to the last thread of grace she had left. He paced the room, avoiding her eyes, his voice rising and falling with frustration, fear, and guilt. She confronted him with the truth she had held inside for weeks. The late-night messages, the unexplained absences, the emotional distance that had silently replaced intimacy. The moment she spoke the words aloud, his expression changed. The warmth she once knew disappeared, replaced by a defensive coldness that cut deeper than anything written on paper. Voices cracked, tears fell. He denied. Then he hesitated. And in that hesitation, that split second where silence told the truth, he refused to speak. She felt her heart break in a way she couldn't repair. Their friend, standing quietly near the window, witnessed everything. They saw her crumble into a chair, covering her face as the weight of betrayal finally became too heavy to hold. They saw him turn away, unable to offer comfort, unable to face what his choices had done to the woman who had stood by him through storms nobody else knew about. She asked him one question, a simple question, one she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. Why? And the answer she received wasn't an explanation. It wasn't clarity. It wasn't remorse. It was silence. The kind of silence that tells you everything you feared is true. That moment carved a scar deeper than any argument could. It was the moment she knew the marriage she was trying to save no longer existed. The moment she realized she had been fighting alone for far too long. And the moment she promised herself that someday, when her voice no longer trembled, she would speak her truth. Not to hurt him, but to heal herself. Now, years later, when she finally shares what happened in that room, her voice still softens because it wasn't anger that broke her. It was the cold, undeniable moment she lost the man she once believed would never let her fall. For years, the rumors drifted through churches like smoke, soft at first, barely noticeable, then thicker, darker, impossible to ignore. They whispered about distance, about tension, about a marriage that no longer looked like the picture-perfect image presented on Sunday mornings. People talked in hallways, in parking lots, in quiet corners after service, asking questions no one had the courage to say aloud, and through all of it she stayed silent, carrying the heavy burden of knowing exactly what they were whispering about, because she had lived every moment of it. Behind closed doors, she endured emotional storms that shook her to her core. She kept praying, hoping the man she once trusted with her heart would come back to her, but every day the gap grew wider. She cried into her pillow at night, careful not to let the tears be heard, because she didn't want to embarrass him, didn't want to damage his ministry, didn't want to fuel gossip that could hurt the people who looked up to him. She protected him for years, even when protecting him meant slowly losing herself. Meanwhile, the rumors continued to spread, twisting into shapes that painted her as the problem, the quitter, the one who gave up too easily. She heard the whispers, felt the judgment, and carried the weight of being misunderstood by an entire community. But what people didn't know, what she refused to reveal at the time, was that she had been fighting a battle far deeper than any rumor could capture. She lived through nights of pleading conversations, moments of heartbreaking truth, and stretches of emotional isolation that left her feeling like a stranger in her own home. The pain she carried wasn't something she could prove with documents or photos. It was emotional, mental, spiritual. It was the silent breaking that happens when the person you love slowly becomes someone you no longer recognize. She hid it so well that even her closest friends believed her smile. Only a few ever saw the truth. The trembling hands, the forced laughter, the exhaustion that followed every church service where she stood beside him, acting like everything was fine. And now, after all these years, as she finally opens up about her past, every rumor that floated through the church suddenly makes sense. Not because the rumors were accurate, but because they barely scratched the surface of what she actually lived through. Her voice doesn't shake with anger when she speaks. It trembles with the ache of someone who carried too much for too long. She isn't speaking to expose him. She's speaking to free herself, to take back the narrative that was stolen from her, and to reveal that sometimes the truth is far quieter, far sadder, and far more human than any rumor ever dared to suggest. She kept the real reason locked inside her heart for so long that it almost became a part of her identity. A quiet ache she carried through the years, through new jobs, new friendships, and new seasons of her life. People thought she left because of disagreements, arguments, or personality differences, but the truth was far deeper, far more painful, and far more private than anyone imagined. She didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She didn't leave because she wanted freedom. She didn't leave because she was weak. She left because staying was slowly destroying her, piece by piece, in ways the public would never see. For years, she lived with emotional wounds she couldn't name without breaking down. She endured moments where she felt invisible, unheard, and unwanted, moments where she questioned her worth, her purpose, her sanity. She tried counseling, prayer, forgiveness, silence, and even pretending nothing was wrong, hoping that one day the man she married would return to her. But each attempt only left her more shattered. The emotional distance grew wider, the tension heavier, the loneliness deeper. She found herself waking up in the middle of the night, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness with tears running down her face, wondering how her life had changed so drastically. The real breaking point, the one she hid from everyone, happened quietly. Not during a fight, not during a dramatic moment, but during a simple dinner at home. They sat at the same table, across from each other, but it felt like miles separated them. He talked, but not to her. His mind was somewhere else, his heart somewhere she no longer had access to. She realized in that moment that she wasn't his partner anymore. She was an obligation, a shadow, a reminder of a chapter he had already emotionally left behind. The pain of that realization hit her harder than any argument ever could. That night, she went into the bathroom, closed the door, and slid down the wall as tears streamed uncontrollably. She understood then what she never wanted to admit. She wasn't leaving because she lost hope. She was leaving because holding on was destroying her spirit. She packed not out of anger, but out of survival. She walked away not because she wanted to break the marriage, but because the marriage had already broken her. When she finally speaks now, she reveals that the real reason she left wasn't a single event, a single mistake, or a single betrayal. It was the emotional abandonment that seeped slowly into her life until it became impossible to breathe. And when she finally shares this truth, her voice is steady. Not because the pain is gone, but because she's finally found the strength to say out loud what her heart carried alone for far too long. When she finally decided to speak, her voice didn't rise with anger or tremble with rage. It softened, carrying the weight of a truth she had protected for decades. People expected bitterness after all the years of silence, but what they heard instead was something far more human, far more heartbreaking. She took a deep breath before she began, her hands resting gently on her lap, her eyes filled with memories she never wanted to revisit. And then, slowly, she confirmed everything, not with accusations, not with dramatic flair, but with a quiet honesty that made her story impossible to ignore. She spoke about the moments she hid from the world, the tears she wiped before walking into church, the nights she lay awake hoping he would reach out and hold her, the loneliness that lived inside her even while she shared a home with a man everyone admired. She talked about the pressure of keeping their image perfect, the emotional bruises no one could see, the times she pretended to be okay because she didn't want to destroy what people believed they had. Every word revealed the pieces of a woman who had survived emotional battles no one else knew she fought. As she continued, her voice wavered only once, not when she described the hurt, but when she mentioned the love she once had for him. She admitted she protected him more than she protected herself. She admitted she stayed silent to save his reputation, to keep the church from falling into chaos, to preserve the idea of him that so many people depended on. She wasn't proud of that silence, but she understood now why she needed to break it. She had spent too many years carrying a story that was suffocating her spirit, too many years letting people blame her for a pain she never caused. Confirming the truth wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of release. She didn't want to destroy him, she didn't want to shame him. She simply wanted to reclaim the part of her life she had lost, her voice. And as she spoke, as she finally let the words come out after years of hiding them, the heaviness on her chest slowly lifted. The truth that once felt like a storm now came out like a soft rain. Painful, yes, but cleansing in a way she never expected. When she finished, she didn't cry, she didn't collapse, she didn't look for sympathy. She simply exhaled, as if decades of pressure had finally slipped out of her lungs. And for the first time in her life, she felt light, not because the pain was gone, but because she no longer had to carry it alone. In the end, her story wasn't about exposing someone else, it was about finally freeing herself. After years of carrying silence like a weight around her heart, she chose truth not to wound, but to breathe again. And, as she stepped out from behind the shadows of her past, something powerful happened. She reclaimed the pieces of herself she had lost in the struggle to protect a life that never protected her. Her voice, once buried under duty and expectation, rose with a quiet strength that reminded the world that even the softest confessions can reshape the truth. And while the revelations may shake those who thought they knew the story, they also reveal the resilience of a woman who refused to let pain define her future. She walks forward now, not with bitterness, but with clarity, finally unburdened, finally understood, and finally free to live a life that belongs only to her.